When you take that beautiful steak off the heat, you may be done cooking, but the meat may not be. The temperature inside it can keep going up. I know this process happens. I've overcooked plenty of food thanks to so-called carryover cooking. But it still feels like it violates some law of physics. How can something get hotter if you aren't adding any heat? And assuming you want to avoid overcooking your food, what can you do about it? This is MinuteFood. First, let's get something straight. You'll see carryover cooking a lot in meat, but it happens in everything from veggies to hard-boiled eggs. Food in general is a pretty terrible conductor of heat. Any heat you apply to the outside takes a while to spread inside. So when you cook something, heat can start piling up at the surface. And as you add more heat, that piles up. By the time you pull whatever you're cooking off the heat, there can be a pretty big temperature difference between the outside and the inside. That gradient is what causes carryover cooking, which is actually really intuitive, at least in a different setting. If I drop some ice into a glass of water, the water will get a bit cooler and the ice will melt a bit. Obvious, right? You would never expect the ice in the water would remain at their initial temperatures. Instinctively, you know that heat will always spread from a hotter area to a cooler one. That's what's happening in your hot out-of-the-pan steak. Heat will spread from the hotter outside to the cooler inside, just like in the ice water. There's also a temperature difference between the hot surface of the meat and the cooler air surrounding it, so some heat will move out of the steak, but the rest will creep inwards, continuing to cook the interior until the heat inside is distributed throughout the whole piece of meat. Once you get this whole gradient and movement of heat thing, you can see why it's so easy to accidentally overcook stuff. But you can also use that knowledge to avoid overcooking stuff. The best way to deal with carryover cooking is to embrace it. Whatever your doneness criteria is, a certain internal temperature or a specific texture, pull the food off the heat before it reaches that benchmark and let carryover cooking finish the job. But how early is that? Science gives us a few rules of thumb. First, flattish foods will experience less carryover than roundish foods because flat foods have lots of surface area to vent heat outwards. The rounder a food is, the less surface area it has, and the more heat will get trapped inside. So the earlier you'll have to stop cooking it to account for the carryover. Size matters too. First, because the bigger something is, the less surface area it has compared to its volume. And we know that less surface area means more carryover. So the earlier you'll have to take it off the heat. But also, big pieces of food simply hold more heat, which can then spread inward. Think about how much more heat there is in a giant jug of water than a tiny glass, and how easily all that heat would spread inwards and melt the ice. Then there's the cooking temperature. At a low temp, like if you're smoking something low and slow or using sous vide, heat has lots of time to spread through the food without piling up. And with little or no temperature gradient, there won't be much movement of heat afterwards. But if you're cooking at a high temperature, probably because you want that delicious gradient between a sizzling, crusty surface and a less cooked middle, you'll see much more carryover. The more of these risk factors you have, the more carryover you'll need to account for. The interior of a big round turkey cooked hot could increase by as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit after you take it out of the oven. The fewer risk factors, the less carryover you can expect. Vegetables, for instance, are generally small and have lots of surface area, so they're much less prone to carryover. If you are really into math, you could probably put together some fancy differential equation to tell you exactly when you should take your food off the heat to get the best results. But that's definitely not me, and chances are it's probably not you either. Luckily, these guidelines will go a long way. If you misjudge things and don't account for enough carryover, there's one thing left to try: the freezer. By increasing the temperature gradient between the surface of the food and the surrounding air, even just for a minute, you can draw a lot of heat out of the food, leaving less behind to keep cooking the inside. And while your guests might be a little surprised to see you pull a finished dinner out of the freezer, it's a lot better than overcooking it, especially when the stakes are high. I love a good steak, but I also know that eating red meat isn't great for the environment. I've made the decision to still eat it, but less of it, and to buy meat that's more sustainably raised. And there's another way to help offset the environmental impact of my dinner, and of all sorts of other day-to-day stuff. Ren, the sponsor of this video. With a little information about your daily life, Ren calculates your carbon footprint, suggests how to reduce it, and even helps you offset it with a monthly contribution toward research-backed, data-driven projects like this one, which provides clean-burning cooking fuel and stoves for refugees in Uganda. These kinds of changes won't save the planet on their own, but they're a step in the right direction. And with Ren, they're super easy. Click the link in the description to get started. Thanks, Ren.